'cause it's here and it's now. Just move every bone to a cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Toward Equality of Life here in the month of November. We're 3 days out from the famous election after which Mr. Barack Obama was elected President of the United States. And today I'm going to speak on the subject of Mr. Barack Obama. And I would like you to pay attention, please, to the idea of trying to understand who this person is and what we're likely to see, not on the basis of race, not on the basis of any other kind of thing that you might think of, but on the basis of how he grew up and what kind of things he studied and what kind of a background and preparation in his life he has had, and how this might be, in fact, a tectonic shift in the United States and for the world. A tectonic shift meaning something very significant going on here. Again, not because he's a black president, so to speak, but something in his philosophies, his training, his mindset, and all these associations that he had, what we might be seeing as we go into the future. Now, the whole possibility of what this presidency might be is really sort of an open book with only vague outlines, and even many of the pundits are saying we don't know what he's going to do next. They're very, very anticipating what is he going to do next. And of course, there are some other contingencies that are so important and critical right now that will have an impact on perhaps the way he would like to proceed in the ideal, and other real problems that are so devastating and so great that they'll probably mix and merge and have an effect on how the whole outcome happens to take place. It's a confluence of events that I'm going to talk about. It's a confluence of Barack Obama being the person he is, as much as we can determine by how he has lived his past, what he has studied, what kind of mindset he has, whether he brings it to the presidency or not, but certainly it's going to have to be an underflowing influence. And the fall of Wall Street happening at the same time, where the government is essentially taking over industries and controlling the industries of the state. The confluence of these events, and to be aware as we go into the future how these two things could be playing out. Now, from a point of view of being African American, this is a very beautiful situation, and it would make people very fulfilled, very, very hopeful, very happy, and even persons who are not African American. The idea of seeing an African American as president, very inspirational to many people. Certainly the people who, a good part of the people who voted for him, thought that the idea of someone being black and being president was a fantastic idea. Now, Barack has cut his teeth, so to speak, all his life on the things that came out through the 60s and beyond the 60s, though he's not a child of the 60s. And there were two sort of mainstream philosophies or attitudes going on at that time. One was the hippie culture, one was love, peace, flower children, and so on. The age of Aquarius, which was supposed to come as we turned into the new century, and the other was the Vietnam War and the calls of the United States as imperialistic, the Students for a Democratic Society, the so-called radicals, and then the Weathermen, and so on. So these were two things coming out of the 60s, and Lyndon Johnson was president for a great deal of that time, and he used to be referred to as a pig in that time. And so you see, we've had much more vile politics in the past. There were many names that were publicly thrown around against the president in those times, and of course he represented to people the establishment, sort of in a way the right, not really, but establishment. So that would sort of be a third influence of the 60s. That was being sort of overthrown and fought against, or lived against, if you were a flower child. Now, how did Barack make his way to the White House? With a lot of ingenuity, guts, and perseverance, certainly. And he also faced an electorate at this time that was fed up and exhausted, tired of going it alone. In fact, we are all so very alone now in this modern society. And the fact that we are, as we are, is not only the spot where our democracy has come, so to speak, has come to, but also the fact that we're totally saturated with technology, digital age, pretty much technology. Technology is also an extremely big factor in the fact that we're exhausted, tired of going it alone, tired of figuring things out for ourselves. And certainly among the young and other people, but among the young who are trying to make their way, there's a sense of the impossibility of individual achievement, especially when you see on the television constant messages that say you have to be a movie star, you have to be beautiful, you have to be a rock star, you have to be a rapper, you have to own a Toyota, you have to own a Mercedes, and people are desperate. How are they going to achieve these things? No one, generally speaking, there's a lot of alienation. You're sort of psychologically alone. More people are taking antidepressants than ever before. And this is the kind of psychological framework, in part, that sets the stage for where we are today. Now, it is very much beautifully the will of the people that has spoken to put Barack Obama in the White House. They also were so disgusted broadly, Republicans and Democrats alike, right wing, left wing, or right, alike, were so disgusted, so upset with the last 8 years of what has been in the White House by someone who, in many ways, certainly should never have taken the mantle of the presidency to begin with, it would seem to me. And so they needed to get away. They just were desperate, not following politics perhaps like I do or other people do, all the intricacies, just following it on a more gross level, just knowing this is not what they want. Everything was going wrong, and as you know the statistics, the country's on the wrong track was great majority saying that the country is on the wrong track. Now, for persons of African American heritage, it's again a wonderful thing, but it also affected secondarily, I would think, people who are Hispanic, Asian, Native American, although Native Americans may be asking, when is it going to be our turn to shine and be in the limelight somehow, some way? So persons who are considered non-white and used to be considered minorities, because Hispanics, as we know, are quickly making the majority of the country. Now, Obama himself, I would say, is not really a racially motivated person. I believe, as far as I can tell, and I know very little about him thus far, he's very deeply pained and concerned about the plight of African Americans, the plight of our cities, but he's not truly, specifically, a person acting on the race card per se, or living in that kind of a framework. But what I do believe he's imbued with, what I do sense from him so far, putting together the dots, trying to make out who he is he's imbued tautologically with the difference in the classes, the haves versus the have-nots, because this is the way he has trained and come up in life, very much surrounded by this kind of theory and philosophy. But again, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, being weary of the world the way it has become in the United States today. People also wanted a savior. And people, perhaps who are Caucasian, wanted to expiate their guilt, or, if not that, to rectify what they saw as an injustice and a time that had come for rectification of injustice to the extent possible. It was also very much a youth vote. Obama was extraordinarily appealing to the young. And young people, I can remember myself as a young person, college person, being very very desirous of a change that was different from whatever was the established way of things being. And Obama himself seems very young. He's 47, but he's a young 47, even at that. And as far as the percentages of people who vote, supposedly there weren't more people this election than the last one for president, but the young voters were very more in the mix than before, and the Republicans were less in the mix than before. Now, the thing about Obama is he doesn't have any history that we really knew about, which people used to talk about. And these are some of the things that we don't know that we might have known about other people. We don't have any records from his first college days in California. We don't have any records from Columbia. We don't have a thesis paper from Columbia because it's said to be not available. We have no records from Harvard. We have no selective service registration release. We have no medical records. I think there was one sheet of a medical record. We have no schedule from his time at the Illinois State Senate. We don't have any records from his time at the Illinois State Senate. These are public, public. We don't have a client list of his law clients when he practiced law. We don't have a copy of an original birth certificate, and as a lot of, as some people have traced and followed very diligently, and they believe he may have been born out of the country in Kenya, and his grandmother, who lives in Kenya, purportedly has said time and again that she witnessed the birth of him. We don't have Harvard Law Review articles, none. University of Chicago articles, none. And record of baptism not released or available. So very, very little history to go on, and in a way kind of an unknown, and this is where we stand, and everybody's waiting to see now what he will do. And of course, you'll see that he's aligning his cabinet to be people that are very familiar figures of the past. These will be mitigating too, because as the people that I've heard the names of so far have not gone the same trajectory as he in what they espouse, what they believe, and what they have studied. So that will be another mitigating factor besides this great bailout and economic collapse that we are going through in the United States at the moment. But as I talk to people about this election, even in Massachusetts, where he won by a very big margin, many people were not favorable to either candidate, but certainly wanted to be rid of Bush, and therefore went for Obama. Then there was that whole segment that is mesmerized by Obama, and I don't think to a great extent it was African American per se, but more white persons who just seem to fall hook, line, and sing, hook, line, and what is that expression? But anyway, fell for him completely and will go anywhere and do anything for him. Really taken by the person. Myself, I will wait and see. I remain totally unaware of what's coming down the pike, and this is what I'm going to talk to you. What I'm suggesting should be things that we could be paying attention to see how this all comes together, because, like I said, a tectonic shift that might have very big significance for who we will become and where we will be going. Not that we're going to be going in one fell swoop overnight, or even in 4 years, or even in 8 years, but is this the beginning, our seeds being sown for something very different that we're not used to in the United States and in the world, spreading through the world. Now, Obama in his book, one of his had said that when it came to acquaintances and connections and people with whom he socialized, learned from, and so on, he mostly chose people from outside ideas. Outside ideas. Some people may call them radical ideas. And in fact, his father held philosophies that were more of the leftist outside idea, and his mother was, by all accounts, very unconventional in how she thought and how she lived her life. And Obama also tells us in his book that when it came to identity and his struggle with it, commonsensically it would seem too that he chose a black identity, and one could very well understand that that would be where one would end up. If one has black skin, certainly people think of people as black when they have black skin, and so it would seem to make sense. And plus, the whole heritage issue and the whole problems of that heritage issue and so on, you know, I'm sure are carried very meaningfully and very carefully by persons that face them. Now, one thing we know is when Obama was about 10 years old, he was introduced to a person who was a member of the Communist Party, Mr. Frank Davis, and he was in his presence and around him for a number of years, and you know, learning and being sort of schooled and guided by this person, who I read said to him something to the effect of, don't believe in the idea that you can just work really hard and get ahead, and not on the basis that you're African American, but don't believe in that kind of a psychological framework that everybody just work really hard and try to achieve and get ahead on an individual basis. And we're going to get into what socialism and communism is not so much of an individual basis. Now, there are many, many leftists, and some would really, they'd be better defined as radical leftists, who are associates and connections and mentors and so on of Mr. Obama. And some of them are socialist, communist, some are Afrocentric, and of course in the African scholarly community there is a whole element of socialism and communistic and black liberation theology that has been discussed and written about for many years now too. So it's all part of the mix. One of the people in this mix too of late would be this Mr. Soros, who's a very wealthy financier who made a lot of money in the futures markets and is an amazing financially astute person, amazingly so. And he has had an awful lot to do. He's from another country, but he's had a lot to do with the left politics in the United States and apparently with this run of Mr. Obama. Now, Mr. Obama ran as a Democrat. And I had said to you the last time that Republicans, that's out for me. That's something I've not even ever considered. It just doesn't exist for me. But the Democrats don't exist for me either, especially after this election. I don't have any connection that I feel to the Democrats or anything that I'm particularly fond of or respect these days. I have very bad feelings about Ms. Pelosi and certainly Harry Reid, Barney Frank, and Howard Dean. And as far as Biden goes, having seen him on the campaign trail, I never cared for what he said one way or another. He didn't mean anything to me, but he was quite a buffoon on the campaign trail, and of course all his gaffes and buffoonery were merely laughed at or just put aside. They were not, because of course the media very much wanted Mr. Obama to be the president, and everything around that was okay. Now, Barack Obama won in part on the basis of being black, on the basis of not having a history, and on the basis, because your history will definitely do you in to a great extent, or cause you difficulties that you have to live up to for all people, because he moved people by his words, because he had an unusual background, because he's young and different appearing, and because he spoke of hope. And because the country was at an all-time low, the Congress and the President both thought of as pretty much as low as they could ever be thought of. And because of the incredible financial collapse that happened a few weeks ago, Now, we are also people that are in the grip of an extremely nervous and uncertain future. Okay. Now, also, it was because he was elusive that Mr. Obama, made his way as well. He said he was against the Patriot Act. He voted for it. He said Jerusalem should be its own capital. Then he said it should be divided. He said he was for gun control. Then he said the decision against that by the Supreme Court was okay. He said he was against FISA and telecom immunity when they gave out information about people, and then he voted for it. He said he was against NAFTA, but maybe he's for NAFTA. He said he wouldn't wear a flag pin, then he did. He said he was against offshore drilling, and then he said he was for it. He said he was for the Iraq immediate pullout, then he said, well, he might have to wait. He said he would rescind tax cuts of the very wealthy, and he might have to put that on hold, and he already suggested he might have to wait on that. He said he was against gay marriage, but then when they asked him about the proposition in California to make it not legal, he was not for that. And he does say, even though he moves between both places, not as a flip-flopper, but right through them, he did say in his speech, his victory speech, I will always tell you where I stand. Now, he's made a lot of promises, but very little on what he exactly would do. And, for example, his idea to cut taxes, which is very compelling to people to get their taxes cut, will he be able to do that with this debt and deficit that we have going on right now? We shall see. But we know that in the final weeks of the campaign, he happened to say to Joe the plumber that it's a good idea to spread the wealth around. And this idea, as we're going to get into it, of redistributing the wealth is a socialist, and the stages of people who write about and study socialism and communism, socialism is the prelude to communism, which is the ultimate, and socialism is where people are still individuals, but the state has a very big hand in their life, and communism is where the whole of the people is one, and somehow the state disappears, and everything is just all the same and one, a collective, if you will. And redistribution of wealth is something that is paramount in both of those philosophies. And another thing that he said, these are all clues that I'm pointing out. Another thing that he said was that people who didn't want to have more money taken so that others could get rebates or credits were selfish. And that's another way it's viewed in socialism and communism, that it's selfish to not do things for the whole instead of for yourself. He also said individual salvation depends on collective salvation, and you will hear that word collective, the collective of the whole. He speaks of the collective, and he spoke in his victory speech as well of the one. Not that we are one, we're all one, we're in it together, but that we all work towards the one being an entity of the whole. And I bring this out to you because of his background and training, as I will continue to elucidate to you as we move on here, has been of these kinds of philosophies, beliefs, and his life has been lived on these to a great extent as well. Now, Mr. Obama also won because he was sensational at getting money. He raised $650 million and probably could have raised more. And he was outspent 4-1, sometimes 7-1 in, he outspent people 4-1, 7-1. So he very skillfully leveraged the money and very skillfully managed the campaign and what he was doing and kind of outsmarted everybody. In the practice of handling so much money, just to show that he's a practical politician, he's not some kind of sainted person, he's very human and very much a politician. it's been reported that what he did was he removed the controls on credit cards where they have a verification system that names match when credit cards are used. And by this, he got a lot of foreign contributions, which are not doable in a campaign, and an awful lot of fake names were able to contribute to his campaign. Now, the media was brutal in this campaign to, generally speaking, to anyone who was not Obama. Mr. McCain was a good and old friend of the media. He was almost most famous for his straight talk and having media on his buses and being so comfortable and friendly with them. They threw him overboard big time, and they pilloried Hillary, and they impaled Palin. And they insisted that, for the most part, many of them, that Obama was going to be the president. And like I said, too, with Mr. Biden, they just gave him a pass when he said things that were, wow, pretty unsettling and unqualified as far as how you'd like a vice president to be thinking. Now, I say about the media, regardless of who was elected, I would say about the media, who the hell is the media? This is who the hell is the media. And the media always has been determining elections for us in recent times, literally. But this time they just became spokespeople. There was no fooling, no pretense about it. The media, as they say, was in the tank. Democrats and Republicans were surveyed on this by Rasmussen, and they both said, yeah, the media was in the tank. Even people who wanted Obama to be president admitted the media was in. The people elected, but the media chose. The media decided. And whole stations were devoted to Obama, like CNN and MSNBC. I used to watch MSNBC, and I had to find out more. I couldn't just follow something that was like a mesmerized think tank thought process that everything is like this, just accept it, just go along with it. That's not the kind of person I am. Hopefully I'm an independent thinker, I'm an independent person. And I just saw that Chris Matthews said yesterday or so that his job is to make the presidency of Obama a success. And I don't think he's on the payroll. But certainly he had that job up till now, as did Olbermann, as did Rachel Maddow, as did other people. And but Matthews now spelled it out. And he used to do such mean things too, like say, when can we get rid of her about Hillary? And you know, so stacked. You know, we always knew Fox was stacked for the right. But for the sake of intellectual purity, intellectual integrity, intellectual honesty, what I saw the left do in stacking it on their side and using language that only swayed everything one way, coercing it to all come out a certain way, far outdid what Fox News ever did on the right. So much so that Howard Wolfson, a standard bearer for the Democratic Party, moved to Fox, as did Geraldine Ferraro, thinking that, you know, of course they were for Hillary, and but they were so upset by what happened, they moved. And I used to have to go to Fox, which I do now, which I never did, in order to get more information that I'm surely not going to get on these stations that suddenly have not become news stations. They've been propaganda arms, as has been Fox. But I've never seen it go this extreme. Now, again, underlying all of this, too, is the idea that you know a person by what a person does and not what a person says. So there are some other things here. In Chicago, it came out to me, and I saw it in the media later, that there was a hammer and sickle flag flying in the crowd during Obama's victory party, which is the flag of the Communist Party. And in the Texas office, I read a report that there was a communist flag with Che Guevara on it. And of course, Mr. Ayers has a big picture of Che Guevara in his office at the University of Chicago. If you ever read about Che Guevara, he's a compelling figure, but if you looked at what really happened with the journey he went on, it wouldn't be such something to be so worshiping of. It might have started out with warm and good ideals, but it certainly didn't end up that way, nor did that of Mao Zedong. Now, I saw this video by chance. I wasn't looking for it, but I remember people say Obama wouldn't salute the flag. And I saw the video by chance. I wasn't looking, and there were two other politicians like this while I guess the anthem was being sung or the Pledge of Allegiance, and Obama was standing there like this. I don't know if he was saying the words, just with his hands down. And then when it came to 9/11 and flowers were to be placed at the memorial, people went and placed them, and Obama threw the flowers. And then at one of his events recently before he was elected, the part that was to have the national anthem sung was canceled out of the show. And then I noticed on 9/11 that Michelle Obama was not present, and I was thinking, well, does this have to do something with the kind of thinking that Reverend Wright talked about 9/11 and the chickens coming home to roost, which is not altogether implausible, I must admit. But just to give you an essence that we're coming at this from a very different, this is a tectonic shift change. And another thing, too, once when the speech in, Denver was going to happen, when people called to get tickets, the phone message said to get tickets you had to do some work for the campaign, and then if you did, you would get the tickets. So, I'm trying to show the kinds of philosophies, the kind of psychological and philosophical things, theoretical things going on here. Now, okay, so change, but change how? And don't forget, whatever change is coming will be impacted and cross-coordinated with the fact that we're in such a financial collapse, and also that the people around him, I would think, are going to be from different mindsets, as far as we can tell right now, than the kind of background he's had. Another thing he did was he told his daughter, apparently, that she had earned a dog, and that's kind of the way people in the socialist-communist schools talk. They decide if you're worthy to receive something. You earn something, and you do it for the whole. Your reward is for the whole or for the greater goal. Not like what we do, what we've become so used to an extreme. You do it for yourself. Everything's for yourself. You show yourself. You brag about yourself. You advertise yourself. You market yourself. You make yourself look as good as possible. You whiten your teeth. You do everything is the self. Well, we're talking something very, very different. Another thing he told people before he became president, to go out there and talk about him, and when you do, to get in their faces when you talk to people, to make them change, which is another community organizer, socialist, communist kind of way of talking. He also said at one time, a few years ago, that he wasn't satisfied with the Constitution as it is, that doesn't have all the kinds of things in it that he would like, or the slant that he would like. And then he had the thing of saying, what about these people with 7 houses? And putting it that way, instead of saying that perhaps that we have to do more, we have to make a society where people can have more than they have and get by more easily than the struggle that they have to do. Then there was that video of the youth all in synchrony going, Obama, Alpha, Omega, Obama, Alpha, Omega, that some teacher taught them. And I heard that the Alpha Omega may mean God. And the sloganeering and the chant of yes we can and so on. The idea that it's the whole, it's an entity. And all of this is happening, but what I'm interested in is open debate, not to find out that these things may be on people's minds and may be ideas that are going to be tried to be brought into more practice, because after all, if this is how you are, and I'm going to show how he came into these ideas, I would just like it. I would never want these things to be happening except with open debate. I think we need an open debate if people hold philosophies that the whole is greater than any individual, the collective, and we're going to have foot soldiers, and we're going to, you know, make it such that everybody's working for everybody, and individualism is not part of the mix. Now, any attempts by socialists and especially communists in this country to try to get somewhere with their ideas have never worked publicly. But it seems that over time they've found other ways to have an effect. What worries that I'll be watching for is that when the whole is most important, free thought cannot be. You can't have people talking and doing whatever they like as long as it doesn't break the law when you're going after a collective union of people. And I worry that it could set the stage for suppression of ideas that are not part of that process. Now, here's something. The influences on Obama's life comprise a who's who of the radical leftist movement, and he has spent most of his life deeply immersed in it. Saul Alinsky is noted for being a communist and a radical leftist who wrote a book of rules and other books of how to change the society into that kind of structure. And Mr. Obama studied to be a community organizer at his foundation called the Industrial Areas Foundation. And beyond Mr. Alinsky's ideas for how to make a revolution, a quiet revolution, you know, not one that's out in the open public. And a couple of people beyond Alinsky, or their names are Cloward Piven, but we won't get into that. They wanted to hasten, they wanted to go a step further on these rules of what to do, seeks to hasten the fall of capitalism by overloading the government bureaucracy with a flood of impossible demands, thus pushing society into crisis and economic collapse. How interesting that we're in an economic collapse and overburdened with impossible demands, as including militarily. All right. The strategy was to create political, financial, and social chaos that would result in revolution, and they used a cadre of aggressive organizers assisted by a friendly news media to force a redistribution of the nation's wealth. Now, is this Barack Obama? We don't know. Is this something he's been indoctrinated in, studied, read, talked about, lived with people about? Certainly it is. Doesn't mean he will go exactly along those lines, but it's in his psyche. And then, no matter where the strategy is implemented, it shares the following features. It organizes previously unorganized groups eligible for government benefits but not currently receiving all they can. It seeks to identify new beneficiaries and create new benefits, and the overarching aim is always to impose new stresses on target systems with the ultimate goal of forcing their collapse. So, and what it does is it has foot soldiers, people like when people do community organizing in this mold, they're trained in it as Obama was, they get people to feel that they're downtrodden and oppressed and to come along with them and be foot soldiers. And they do things for the whole. This is not go get a degree and make the most money you can. This is if you make any money, you put it into the communal pot. Now, and they don't get paid, little or no pay. Well, they might get food, they'll get shelter, things like that. So, very opposite the incentive model we have, and I'm telling you to watch for this tectonic shift. Is it able to happen in 4 or 8 years? No. Are these confluences of influences coming together? Okay. Now, in 1970, one of these groups was established to set out these goals, and the name of that group is the famous or infamous ACORN. And it was involved in housing, voting rights, illegal immigration, and other issues. Now, in the late 80s, I met someone involved in the illegal immigration, and this person was from a South American country, and she was working extremely to get as many people into the country illegally to partake of the benefits, and she was very vociferous and vehement about it. You know, felt it was the just thing to do and the necessary thing to do, and would be damned if she wouldn't do that. So I've seen some of this in operation, and I have had very close acquaintances with radical left persons in different decades of my life, and perhaps that's why I look at this a little more starkly than other people might. That might have something to do with it. So, the idea is to overwhelm the system with fraudulent registrations, use multiple entries of the same names, names of deceased from the phone book, and so on. Make the system difficult to police by lobbying for minimal identification standards. And those came with things like the motor voter law. And by the way, Barack Obama was the head counsel for ACORN for some time of his life. Sometimes actually going to argue for them in court and just generally being counsel for this group. And one thing he worked with them on was the motor voter law, and a lot of difficulties came out of that one, where people could just register to vote on the spot. And also he worked with them on the expansion of the Community Reinvestment Act, which you might have heard of. And that was something that was put into place, I think, with the Carter administration, and then it was made even bigger during the Clinton administration. And it was forcing the banks to give loans to people even if they didn't meet the standards. And some people blame that, of course, for the big financial problems we have now, although we can't get into how really Wall Street is to blame for the real financial problems that we have now. But anyway, the idea is to overwhelm the country with problems that it really cannot handle. All right, and Countrywide was very much working with the ACORN people, and you know Countrywide is the most, shall we say, connected or identified with the subprime mortgage mess. And even when the bailout money was given, remember when Paulson went and asked for that $700 billion recently? The Democrats wanted 20% of the money to go to ACORN, if you can believe it. Just a few weeks ago, when that big crisis was being handled, if that's what you call what happened with it. Now, the radical left is something bigger than the United States, too. It's worldwide, and so, you know, any kind of influence in the United States that is catching on will have an impact around the world as well, sort of a juicing up of the whole thing. Now, what is totalitarianism? It's a concept used to describe political systems where a state regulates nearly every aspect of public and private life, and they have an all-embracing ideology and propaganda disseminated through state-controlled mass media, a single party controlling the state, personality cults, control of the economy, restriction of free discussion and criticism, mass surveillance, and sometimes terror tactics. It attempts to mold the private life, the soul, the spirit, and the morals of citizens to a dominant ideology. And you know, I couldn't help but think of Michelle Obama when she told people when she was speaking freely, your souls are broken. And anyway, the ambition is total. So, movements like communism have a common trait in picturing Western democracies and their values as decadent, with people too soft, too pleasure-loving, and too selfish. And that you have to sacrifice to a higher cause, which implies and otherwise it's an inner moral and biological decay. And these movements offered the prospect of a glorious yet imaginary future to frustrated people, enabling them to find a refuge from the lack of personal accomplishments and so on. Now, I don't want anybody to tell me what ideas I should have. That's very worrisome. This may not happen. I'm trying to put a little perspective on this, best I know how. I could be totally wrong, and whatever. It's still a tectonic shift because this is the background to where we are, and it's unlike any we've had in any presidential election, as is the economic collapse, a confluence, and in that. The government owns so many corporations, or is in the life of the corporations already. Now, Obama, he's going to work on infrastructure, I believe, for jobs, a good thing. I wish he would work on trains. I don't know if he will. He's going to say conserve energy, which is a good thing. He's going to say conserve in general. He's going to be for the environment. He's going to be for education. He's going to be for parenting. He's going to be for unions. But one thing about unions that I heard he's for is where they don't each get a secret vote, that the union votes for everybody as one thing. So he we will see. Maybe he will be the greatest president ever. Possible, quite possible. Totalitarianism, though, I feel with the philosophies of the whole and the collective and foot soldiers and anti-selfishness, sacrifice to the goal of the whole, of there just being a whole, will stifle dissent. There are already truth squads in Missouri with Obama where they warned people if anyone criticized him, people would prosecute them. He threw people who weren't favorable to his candidacy off his plane in the late days of the campaign. We know what he said to Joe the plumber. Oh, but the point being that the state then investigated everything about Joe the plumber, which apparently is not illegal, but wow, that makes the hair on your skin stand up. And he has chosen Rahm Emanuel to be his chief of staff, who's been described as explosive, profane, wired, and ruthless. So he's going to have Kerry in there. Oh, geez, that I don't go for. And this fairness doctrine. Oh my goodness, talk about the suppression of speech. The idea that now they don't like Nancy Pelosi has been, and the Democrats have been dealing with this for quite a while. They don't like that there are so many successful programs on the radio stations that are conservative. And so they're going to bring back a doctrine that says anything you say on the right has to be balanced by someone saying something on the left. I find this very, very chilling. We know that Al Gore's attempt with Air America failed financially because not enough people listened to it. So people are listening to the programs they find, but here's an attempt, and it's being discussed very seriously, to put onto the media what you want the people to hear and make it a doctrine that you can't just be saying something from the right, you've got to listen to something from the left. Very interesting. Another thing is I've never seen a group be as nasty, vile, and mean, except for when Lee Atwater, who died of that brain tumor, I think he worked for the first Bush election, the father. I've never seen such nasty, vile, spiteful, mean stuff come out as I did from the left this year, from the Daily Kos, the Politico. I can't believe the level of meanness and vengeance that came out. And Claire McCaskill from Missouri, spokesperson for the Obama campaign, when she was giving Romney a headphone at some conference they were at, she said to him, "Here, I spit on them," and she handed him the earphones. We know Keith Olbermann, how nasty he is. And I used to watch Letterman. I'm not a big fan, but I'd go for the joke sometime if I were up. I'm always up late, but I mean, sometimes I'd tune in just to hear. I couldn't believe how mean he was to anyone who was not Obama. And I kind of don't have the same feeling about Letterman anymore. It's just too much. It's like a total propaganda going one way. One way. Okay. Now, in the bailout, Obama didn't blink. Now, don't forget, this kind of feeds into the idea that the state has a hand in everything. You know, the collapse is good in a way. The collapse, gives you more leverage. The country is dying. The country is saying, who's going to help us? We're really at a loss here. Harry Reid said, nobody knows what to do. And Paulson, Paulson went and grabbed that money from Pelosi and the Congress, and believe me, he grabbed it like this. And you know, since that time, the money's been spent to give dividends to people, to beef up the capital reserves, to buy other institutions, to pay bonuses. It has not gone, and more is going to be asked for. The auto people are there asking for more money today. What a sham. What a crisis, what a breakdown, what a collapse is going on in the country. And Pearlstein, wonder about him from the Washington Post, obviously very pro-left newspaper as well, saying at the time Paulson came for the money, fairness cannot be a criteria in getting this money. Fairness cannot be a criteria. And of course, AIG is pretty much run by our government now. Goldman tried to pretend it didn't need the money. It's sitting pretty now, took the money, not using the money for the right purposes. What have we got here? The confluence of the economic collapse. Bear Stearns, $29 billion. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, $200 billion. Franklin Raines out of that group, left having been accused and never really shown otherwise, cooked the books to get better bonuses. AIG, $85 billion plus. Federal FHA housing rescue bill, $300 billion. Mortgage community grants, $4 billion. JP Morgan Chase, $87 billion. Auction facility at the Fed, $200 billion. Depression-era exchange stabilization fund, $50 billion. Purchase mortgage securities from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, $144 billion. Total so far and mounting since this was written, $1.8 trillion. The country is bankrupt, ladies and gentlemen, and it's perfect for a confluence of events, a tectonic shift. The Fed is going deeper and deeper. It buys equities in companies now. And you know what's interesting? The day they gave the money, actually, it was a bright sunny day. The minute they passed that, at least in Boston, things grew very dark that afternoon. Very interesting. And by the way, just for the record, it was reported not widely that people of the Middle East may have been short-selling our stocks to further this collapse that was going on. Very interesting. Remember when short selling was banned? But the country is bankrupt, ladies and gentlemen. And the auto industry, now they're telling us they've got to have, it was $25 billion, now it's $50 billion today. They're saying, and they're running through billions of dollars. They've got pension funds too. We knew this trouble was happening for years. And now as the proverbial stuff hits the fan, now they're saying you can't let us fail because so many jobs will be lost. Well, the brutality of it is we don't need 1 million more automobiles. We need trains. But what are we going to have to do? Bail out old technology, old ways of living. And they're too big to fail, but you and I, ladies and gentlemen, are too small to succeed. And the depths of the issues and the crisis and the fact of what will happen if they don't preserve them for a while and keep them going shows you that for that reason alone, corporations are a bad way to structure society. But my question is, beware that we could be losing freedom with all these events coming together. And I would hate to see things come under the radar screen in a stealth fashion without an open debate of who we are, where we should go, how we should be living. Should we be bailing out these companies? Should we be bankrupting our country, our children, our future? And you know what people like to say? Restore consumer confidence. And I say to you, you don't need consumer goods, you don't need corporations, and you don't need international trade. You need local trade, local farms, local jobs, small organizations, and you need open discussion, frank discussion of who you are, what you believe, where you stand, what you intended to do. As we stand now, the Congress in Washington are more in charge of us than we are of them. They are more in charge of us than we are in them. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.
Take it to yourself. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. You know your daddy was born to die. All my trials, Lord, soon be over. If religion were a thing that money could buy, the rich would live and the poor would die. All my trials, Lord, soon be over. I had a little book, it was given to me, and every word spelled liberty. All my trials, Lord, soon be over. Too late, my brother, too late, but never mind. All my trials, Lord, soon be over. Joshua won the battle of Jericho. Jericho, Jericho, yes, man, Joshua won the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's tramping round the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He's marching with truth and justice, with a mighty and swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.